Over the last 3 years, we have come to learn of the role that our government officials have played in demanding censorship by social media platforms. Some of that censorship was overt, particularly as it related to COVID, but some of it was done in secrecy, as we discovered in the Twitter files. Now, many of us thought that once we had uncovered the censorship, governments would be sufficiently embarrassed to stop doing it. And to some extent, that's been the case. But now, governments around the world are stepping up their efforts to demand ever more censorship from social media platforms. Last week, the Federal Bureau of Investigation quietly announced it had resumed its outreach to social media companies. In Scotland, the police can now investigate comedians under a new hate speech law if someone complains about a joke. And major media outlets are currently working with government-funded censorship activists at the University of Washington, Stanford Internet Observatory to demand greater censorship in the name of saving democracy. Without a doubt, those of us who have uncovered the censorship have had an impact. On 60 Minutes last Sunday, the government-funded advocates of censorship at the University of Washington say they had stopped demanding censorship of social media platforms.
While they will continue releasing their research reports on misinformation, they will no longer send their findings to the social media platforms.
And simply drawing awareness to who is demanding the censorship and who is funding them has weakened their power. But governments, government-funded NGOs, and the news media have been relentless in their demands for a crackdown on speech they deem hateful and false. At the Supreme Court last week, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson expressed unironic concern that the First Amendment restricts the government's ability to censor.
Justice Jackson?
So my biggest concern is that your view has the First Amendment hamstringing the government in significant ways.
And everybody from the New Yorker to the New York Times to NBC are suggesting that the only people who worry about government censorship are Trump supporters, which is obviously false. The 60 Minutes segment in particular was shocking. Lesley Stahl never mentioned the mass censorship of accurate information about COVID's origins, about COVID vaccines, or the lockdowns. She falsely suggested that shining a light on the censorship activists was tantamount to their persecution.
There are people who make the accusation that going after these researchers, misinformation researchers, is tantamount to harassment.
And she suggested that if the government didn't do more to censor misinformation, Trump supporters would overthrow the government, which is truly a form of disinformation aimed at scaring people into giving up our first and most fundamental freedom. There's many reasons why they're doing this. The media have